The stale air of the gym hung heavy, a familiar cocktail of sweat, liniment, and the ghost of old ambition. It was long before dawn, the kind of hour when the city outside was still dreaming, but for me, the day had already begun. My boots echoed on the worn concrete floor as I walked past empty wrestling mats, the canvas silent, waiting. This is where my world truly existed. Far from the roar of the crowd, the blinding lights, and the fabricated drama of the arena, entende? Here, in the quiet, I was the architect, the sculptor, the one who saw the raw clay and envisioned the finished statue. But no one would ever know my name. They cheer for the wrestlers, percebe. They always do. I hear it in my sleep sometimes, that deafening wave of adoration, a sound that has never and will never be directed at me. I'm the ghost in the machine, the silent architect of their glory, and the first to fall when they stumble. Every day, I step into this ring of colossal egos and relentless expectations, knowing that my name will never flash across the marquee, percebe? It's a weight I carry, a quiet, suffocating truth that settles deep in my bones. I chose this path, yes, but the constant invisibility still chafes. It's a bitter pill to swallow, pouring your entire being into another's success, knowing that if they soar, the credit is theirs alone, and if they crash, the blame somehow finds its way back to your doorstep. My reflection in the grimy mirror of the gym showed tired eyes, a face etched with the silent battles I fought daily. It wasn't just physical exhaustion, it was the mental toll, the constant negotiation with oversized personalities, the relentless pressure for immediate results, the ever-present fear of what one wrong move could mean. I remember Marcus, a kid with fire in his belly, but a fragile ego, nay? I spent months with him, reshaping his stance, refining his submissions, but more importantly, rebuilding his confidence after a devastating loss. I was his sounding board, his therapist, his unwavering belief when he had none left. When he finally hit that perfect German suplex, the one we'd practiced 1,000 times, and the crowd erupted, I felt a surge of pride so intense it almost buckled my knees. But then I saw him, bathed in the spotlight, soaking it all in, and I knew. My work was done, my purpose fulfilled, and I would simply fade back into the shadows, another forgotten architect. That's the deal I made with myself years ago, the unspoken contract of this profession. Sacrifice almost invisibly, keeping others at the top while remaining on the sidelines, entende? The smell of stale sweat clung to the air, a constant reminder of the physical punishment these athletes endured and the responsibility that rested squarely on my shoulders. Every training session, every single move carried the inherent risk of an injury that could end a career in a heartbeat. I've seen it happen. I've held a young man's hand as the doctor delivered news that shattered his dreams. News that meant months, maybe years of grueling rehabilitation, or worse, a forced retirement. And in that moment, I wasn't just a coach. I was the one who had to help them pick up the pieces, mend not just their bodies, but their broken spirits. The physical risks were obvious, but the emotional cost, that's what truly weighed me down. When a wrestler goes down, it's not just their pain I feel. It's the echo of all the hours, the sweat, the shared dreams that now hang in the balance. It's a constant, suffocating weight. The instability of this career gnaws at me too, certo? One promotion closes, another opens, trends shift, and suddenly the phone stops ringing.
There are no guarantees, no long-term contracts for the likes of me, entende? We're only as good as our last success, and that success is always dependent on someone else. I push them, mend them, guide them through a world where one wrong move can end a career, and the pressure for immediate results is a constant, suffocating weight, percebe? I watch them soar or crash, and with every victory, every devastating injury, I carry a burden few understand. It's a lonely path, a constant battle against the clock, against doubt, against the very nature of a sport where the spotlight is never meant for me. This is my life, lived in the shadow, knowing the fight is never truly my own. But today, the shadow felt heavier than usual. I had a new recruit arriving, a raw talent, a kid with a reputation for being difficult. And I knew, before he even stepped through that door, that my greatest challenge yet was about to begin. The door creaked open, admitting a sliver of the morning light that seemed too bright for the dim gym, certo. He stood there, framed by the harsh glow, a silhouette of undeniable presence, intende. Jax, that was the name I'd been given, accompanied by a whispered warning from the promotion's head. Raw talent, but a handful. Good luck. He wasn't just a handful. He was a storm cloud, a walking, breathing challenge to every principle I held dear. His eyes, when they finally met mine, held a defiant glint, a mixture of arrogance and a hidden, almost desperate hunger. He carried himself with a swagger that spoke of innate athleticism, but also of a deep-seated belief that rules, and perhaps coaches, didn't quite apply to him. "You're the one who's gonna make me a star," he drawled, his voice carrying an unearned confidence that grated against my worn nerves. It wasn't a question, it was a statement, a demand, and a clear signal of the battle ahead. I felt the familiar prickle of annoyance, a sensation I'd learned to suppress over countless years of dealing with inflated egos and misplaced ambition, você sabe. My response was measured, calm, a stark contrast to the tempest brewing inside me. "I'm the one who's going to teach you how not to break your neck, Jax, percebe. The star part, that's up to you." My words hung in the stale air, a gauntlet thrown, and for a fleeting moment I saw a flicker of surprise in his eyes, quickly masked by that same defiant smirk. We moved to the mat, the familiar scuff of my boots a grounding sound in the echoing space. I started with the basics, footwork, balance, the foundational elements that separate a brawler from a craftsman. Jax moved with an explosive power, a natural athleticism that few possessed, but his technique was sloppy, rushed, a product of relying on brute force rather than precision. "Slow down," I instructed, my voice firm but patient. "Every step has a purpose, and down every pivot a reason." He'd nod, give me a perfunctory yeah, and then revert to his old habits the moment my gaze shifted. It was like trying to sculpt water, você sabe. This wasn't just about teaching a move. It was about dismantling an ego, brick by painful brick, and rebuilding a disciplined athlete from the ground up. My mind raced, already mapping out the psychological war I knew I had to wage. He had talent, yes, an undeniable spark, but without discipline, without respect for the craft, that spark would quickly burn itself out, or worse, lead to a career-ending injury, ne? I remembered the fear in Marques's eyes, the crushing despair after his injury, and the silent promise I'd made to myself then. I would do everything in my power to prevent that for my athletes. My mind raced, already mapping out the psychological war I knew I had to wage. He had talent, yes, an undeniable spark, but without discipline, without respect for the craft, that spark would quickly burn itself out, or worse, lead to a career-ending injury, ne? I remembered the fear in Marcus's eyes, the crushing despair after his injury, and the silent promise I'd made to myself then. I would do everything in my power to prevent that for my athletes.
But how do you protect someone who doesn't believe they need protecting? How do you teach caution to a whirlwind? The weight of that responsibility settled heavily on my shoulders, a familiar, suffocating burden, Wasasabi. The hours bled into one another, the rhythmic thud of bodies on the mat, my constant instructions, his intermittent bursts of frustration. He'd argue, question my methods, always with that undercurrent of, why do I need this? Every fiber of my being wanted to unleash the frustration, to yell, to demand respect, but I knew that would only push him further away in Tende. My role wasn't just a coach, it was a psychologist, a negotiator, a silent warrior battling not just his opponents, but his own demons. I watched him execute a simple role, too fast, too reckless, his landing jarringly hard. Again, I said, my voice unwavering, slower, control. He glared at me, his chest heaving, a vein throbbing in his temple. What's the point? I can do it. My gaze was unwavering. The point, Jax, is to do it right every single time. Because one day, doing it wrong will cost you everything. He tried again, a little less power, a little more thought, but still not enough. I could feel the tension radiating from him, the resistance, the unspoken question of whether this was even worth his time. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that this kid, with all his raw talent, was teetering on a knife edge. My future, my reputation, perhaps even my very livelihood, depended on whether I could pull him back from the brink before his unbridled confidence led him and me into a disaster. The gym grew quiet again as he stared at the mat, his face a mask of conflict, certo? And then he looked up at me, a challenge burning in his eyes, and a single, dangerous question formed on his lips that made my blood run cold. What's the point if I'm not actually fighting anyone? Jax's voice cut through the quiet, a sneer twisting his lips. He wasn't asking for an explanation, he was challenging the very foundation of my teaching, mocking the meticulous drills I'd spent decades perfecting, My blood ran cold, not from anger, but from a deeper, more unsettling realization. He didn't just lack discipline, he lacked respect for the process, for the inherent dangers, for me, Intende. Every fiber of my being wanted to unleash the fury that had simmered for hours, to tell him this wasn't a game, that lives and careers hung in the balance with every sloppy move, Intende. But I held it back. I always did. My gaze remained steady, reflecting none of the turmoil inside me. The point, Jax, is that every move, every punch, every fall is a performance. And in this business, a performance has to be flawless, or it's a disaster, certo? You're not just fighting an opponent, you're fighting gravity, physics, and the expectations of thousands, Wasasabi. He scoffed, turning away to grab a water bottle, the dismissive gesture a fresh stab at my patience, certo? I watched him, my mind already calculating, strategizing. This wasn't a physical battle, it was psychological warfare. I'd seen it before, countless times. The raw talent, the undeniable charisma, but beneath it, a brittle ego, a fear of failure masked by arrogance. I thought of a young woman named Clara years ago, brilliant in the ring, but so convinced of her own invincibility that she skipped vital safety drills. I warned her, pleaded with her, but she just smiled, that same confident, dismissive smile I now saw on Jax. And then, the crash. A simple, botched landing, and her career was over before it truly began. But how do you protect someone who doesn't believe they need protecting? How do you teach caution to a whirlwind? The weight of that responsibility settled heavily on my shoulders, a familiar, suffocating burden, Wasasabi. The hours bled into one another, the rhythmic thud of bodies on the mat, my constant instructions, his intermittent bursts of frustration. He'd argue, question my methods, always with that undercurrent of, why do I need this? Every fiber of my being wanted to unleash the frustration, to yell, to demand respect. But I knew that would only push him further away, Entende? My role wasn't just a coach. It was a psychologist, a negotiator, a silent warrior battling not just his opponents, but his own demons. I watched him
I felt the familiar pang of regret, the lingering guilt that I hadn't pushed harder, hadn't found a way to break through her hubris. I wouldn't make that mistake again, not with Jax. "All right, Jax," I said, my voice cutting through the clink of his water bottle against the metal rack. "Let's try the back bump again. Hey, this time I want you to tell me why you're doing each step." He groaned, a theatrical display of boredom, but he walked back to the mat. I watched him, every muscle, every nuance of his posture. He went through the motions, falling backward, landing with a jarring thud that echoed through the empty gym. "Você sabe?" "Why the spread-out landing, Jax?" I asked, my voice flat. He shrugged. "To distribute the impact, I guess. Less pain." My eyes narrowed. "Less pain for you, maybe. But what about the person taking the move, você sabe? Bem, what if you're too stiff, too uncontrolled? You could knock the wind out of them, cause a concussion. It's not just about your safety, it's about theirs too. This isn't a solo sport, no matter how much you want it to be." He looked genuinely surprised for a moment, a flicker of something other than defiance in his eyes. It was a tiny crack, a momentary chink in his armor, and I leaned into it. "Every move has a consequence, Jax. Every single one. And my job is to make sure you understand those consequences before you step into a ring with another human being." I moved closer, my voice dropping to a near whisper. "I've seen careers ended. I've seen lives changed forever because of one misstep. I've held hands in hospital rooms, watched dreams shatter. Do you understand that?" His gaze dropped, his jaw clenched, and for the first time, he didn't have a quick retort. The weight of that responsibility, the quiet dread of it, felt heavier than usual on my shoulders. It was a burden I carried for every one of my athletes, a constant, suffocating fear that gnawed me day and night, certo? The hours stretched, the rhythmic thud of bodies on the mat interspersed with my calm, unwavering instructions, no? I pushed him, not just physically, but mentally. I dissected his movements, his breathing, even the way he held his gaze. He resisted, argued, but less frequently now, the defiance slowly giving way to a grudging acceptance. I saw glimpses of the talent, the raw power that had drawn me to him, but also the deep-seated insecurities that fueled his arrogance. He was a puzzle, a complex array of contradictions, and I was determined to solve him. The gym grew darker as the afternoon wore on, the single overhead light casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to mirror the unseen battles I fought. My own body ached, my throat was dry, but I couldn't stop. No, not yet. Just as I thought we were making progress, as he executed a sequence with a rare hint of precision, he suddenly stopped, his chest heaving, a vein throbbing in his temple. He straightened up, his eyes burning with a renewed, almost desperate frustration. "This is too slow," he bit out, his voice raw. "I need to be out there. I need to be seen. Bang, I can't waste my time on this." He swept his arm around the empty gym, a gesture of contempt for the very place I considered sacred. My heart sank. I'd seen it before, the impatience that outweighed any desire for mastery, the hunger for the spotlight that blinded them to the path required to reach it safely. My own exhaustion, the mental and emotional drain of battling him all day, suddenly felt overwhelming. I knew this was the moment, the crossroads where I either broke through or lost him completely. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that his next words would determine everything. Just as I thought we were making progress, as he executed a sequence with a rare hint of precision, he suddenly stopped, his chest heaving, a vein throbbing in his temple.
He straightened up, his eyes burning with a renewed, almost desperate frustration. "This is too slow," he bit out, his voice raw. "I need to be out there. I need to be seen. Bang, I can't waste my time on this." He swept his arm around the empty gym, a gesture of contempt for the very place I considered sacred. My heart sank. I'd seen it before. The impatience that outweighed any desire for mastery. The hunger for the spotlight that blinded them to the path required to reach it safely. My own exhaustion, the mental and emotional drain of battling him all day, suddenly felt overwhelming. I knew this was the moment, the crossroads where I either broke through or lost him completely. And I knew with a chilling...
"This is too slow," he bit out, his voice raw. "I need to be out there. I need to be seen. I can't waste my time on this." He swept his arm around the empty gym, a gesture of contempt for the very place I considered sacred. My heart sank, a familiar, heavy plummet. Certo? I felt a surge of something akin to despair, a crushing weariness that settled deep in my bones. All the hours, the years, the quiet sacrifices, dismissed with a contemptuous wave. Percebe? It was the same story, time and again. The hunger for the spotlight, blinding them to the very path required to reach it safely, sustainably. My own exhaustion, the mental and emotional drain of battling him all day, suddenly felt overwhelming. I knew this was the moment, the crossroads where I either broke through or lost him completely. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that his next words would determine everything. I took a slow, deep breath, letting the stale air fill my lungs, trying to push back the frustration, the bitter taste of being unvalued. My gaze never left him. He stood there, chest heaving, a vein throbbing in his temple, a coiled spring of impatience and arrogance. He genuinely believed he was above this, above the meticulous, repetitive, soul-numbing work that built champions, and more importantly, kept them from breaking, nah? I felt the weight of every broken dream I'd witnessed, every shattered career, every tear-filled conversation in a hospital room. That burden, the silent promise I'd made to myself to prevent such tragedies, was what kept me going, even when faced with insolence like his. "You want to be seen, Jax?" I said, my voice quiet, almost a whisper, yet it cut through the silence of the gym like a scalpel. Percebe? He flinched slightly, surprised by my lack of anger. "You want to be a star? Tell me, what kind of star burns brightest? The one that flares up, brilliant for a moment, then collapses into darkness? Or the one that shines steadily, consistently, year after year, illuminating the entire sky?" I paused, letting the question hang in the air, watching for any flicker of comprehension in his defiant eyes. This isn't about being flashy for a single night. This is about building a career that lasts. It's about being able to walk away from this business on your own 2 feet, not in a wheelchair. He shifted, uncomfortable, but didn't speak. The quiet was thick with unspoken tension. "I've seen them all, Jax," I continued, my voice gaining a low, gravelly intensity. "The ones who thought they were too good for the basics, você sabe? The ones who relied on pure athleticism, who scoffed at technique. They were spectacular, yes, for a short while. But then a knee buckled, a neck twisted, a head hit the mat just wrong, and the roar of the crowd turned into a deafening silence. The spotlight found someone else, and they were forgotten, nursing injuries and shattered dreams, all because they were too fast for the fundamentals." I walked closer, my shadow falling over him, my gaze unwavering, unflinching. "Do you know what it's like to stand over a kid, barely out of his teens, looking at his broken neck on an X-ray, knowing you tried to warn him, knowing he didn't listen, você sabe? I do."